Do you think you are one of the smartest people on the planet?
Yes.
Do you think, say, Albert Einstein, do you think his IQ is higher than yours?
You know, that's a very difficult question. I have a lot of respect for Einstein. I like him personally. I like his theory. I think that the man was absolutely brilliant. So I hesitate to say that I'm smarter than Einstein, but I don't think he was smarter than I am.
It just so happened that Oppenheimer grew up in New York, and he was a bit spindly, and his father wanted to toughen him up, and so he sent him out to New Mexico to ride horses. He would take off on horseback riding trips into the wilds of New Mexico for 3-4 days at a time with a jar of peanut butter and a bottle of whiskey, and must have seemed like a good idea.
We headed to the far reaches of Missouri, a 5-hour drive passing small towns and farm fields down a roller coaster of a country highway because we wanted to find this man. So what's so special about this low-key guy living a low-key life? We'll go inside his house. See that chalkboard? See the board in the living room? Can you figure out what any of that means? We couldn't either. That's not doodling.
This particular paper is on something called a conspansive manifold.
That's the work of a guy with an estimated IQ of about 200.
And you see how it's kind of built up into a big mound here?
Yep.
Theoretically, this should all be flat.
Before moving out here, Chris worked as a nightclub bouncer for 20 years. And I asked him to show me some of his moves.
And of course, if the person who is coming at you is very, very big, right, he's very big, he's very muscular, yeah, and whatnot, what you want to do is...
Right, okay. Oh, God!
I have been asked whether, in the years to come, it will be possible to kill 40 million American people in the 20 largest American towns by the use of atomic bombs in a single night. I am afraid that the answer to that question is yes. I have been asked whether there are specific countermeasures against the atomic bomb. I know that the bombs that we make in Los Alamos cannot be exploded by such countermeasures. I do not think there is any foundation for the hope that such countermeasures will be found. I have been asked whether there is hope for the nation's security in keeping secret some of the knowledge which has gone into the making of the bombs. I am afraid there is no such hope. I think the only hope for our future safety must lie in a collaboration based on confidence and good faith with the other peoples of the world.
To bring that point a little more, the one story from the book that I will ask you about this evening is a different path that Chris Langan and Robert Oppenheimer took. Please very briefly describe who Chris Langan is, what he is doing, and why his path is so different from Oppenheimer, who attempted to murder his professor but became famous.
Yeah. Well, you've given away my punchline. Okay, but this very point, I tell the story in the book about this guy named Chris Langan, who is believed to be the person with the highest IQ in maybe the world, certainly America. And his IQ is, you know, it's impossible to tell. When you get into the upper ranges of the IQ test, of course, the IQ test ceases to become useful. So you have to develop, for people who score really high, you have to develop like super IQ tests. And then out of them, you develop an even more extravagant IQ test. It's like it's like Russian dolls. And then you, in the end, you have this kind of super IQ test. Anyway, this guy got like 19 out of 20 on the super IQ test. So he, and he's for much of his life, he's been a bouncer in a bar. So the question is, how is it that the guy with the highest IQ like that we've ever seen, he's got 40 points on Einstein, for goodness sake, right? How is it he's a bouncer in a bar? So I was trying to, the reason is, of course, that once you're past a certain point of smartness, probably an IQ of 120, all those extra IQ points don't matter. It's the same thing we've been talking about. It's an entrance criteria, not an excellence criteria. And so I thought it would be really fun to compare him. And I tell the story of his life, and his life is really interesting because he gets a scholarship to college, and he drops out for the most kind of bizarre and totally hard to understand reasons. his scholarship gets screwed up and he can't convince Reed College, where he's going, to let him stay, and so he drops out and he never actually gets his BA. And this man, who by rights should have gotten like 4 PhDs and published 1,000 scientific papers, ends up as a bouncer in a bar in Long Island. And so I decided to contrast this to the story of Robert Oppenheimer, who is a similar kind of child, one of these 1 in a billion kids with a super, super high IQ, and everyone thought he was a genius. But he doesn't grow up as Chris Langan did in this kind of very poor, impoverished background. He grows up on Central Park West, and he goes to ethical culture, and he goes to Harvard, and then he goes to Cambridge. And when he also, when he's in college, encounters a difficulty. Only his difficulty is not that they screw up the paperwork on his scholarship. His difficulty is that he tries to murder his tutor at Cambridge. And what happens to Oppenheimer when he tries to murder his tutor at Cambridge? He talks his way out of it. They give him probation, and the punishment is he has to go down to London and see a Harley Street psychiatrist once a week, right? So here's this wonderful, little comparison. The super brilliant kid who gets drummed out of Reed College because his paperwork gets screwed up, and the super brilliant kid who tries to murder his tutor. By the way, not just any tutor. This guy Blackburn, or Black something, who goes on to win a Nobel Prize later. So he tries to murder a future Nobel Prize winner. And what happens to him? He goes on to hold the single most important government job of the 20th century, right? The Manhattan Project. So that's all about, that has, at this point, we are so far beyond IQ, and we're talking about other things. We're talking about your ability to negotiate your social surroundings and to get your way in the world. And so that whole chapter is all about the importance of class, because the argument there is that Oppenheimer was taught how to get his way and negotiate his way out of trouble, because that's what you learn when you grow up in an educated, wealthy family on Central Park West. That is the gift that upper middle class parents give to their kids. And that is the thing that is notably lacking from the upbringing of children who grow up on the other side of the tracks. And that's another one of these impediments that we don't want to talk about, and I think that we have to acknowledge if we're going to do something about or help those on the other side of the tracks to achieve.